A man leaves his wife paralyzed after a serious accident to marry his own nurse. On the day of the wedding, the doctor unexpectedly appears with a video and warns, "You need to see this now." As the images begin to swirl and reveal a disturbing detail about the night of the accident, the groom collapses unconscious in front of everyone. And what the video shows changes everything in a shocking way. During the wake of a 35-year-old woman who had been hospitalized for 2 years in a vegetative state after an accident, her husband announces his shocking decision, "I can't live like this anymore. I'm going to marry your nurse." 3 days later, a hidden camera reveals the terrifying truth that will make you question everything you think you know about love and betrayal. Mark contemplates his wife Sarah in the hospital bed. 2 years have passed since the accident that left her paralyzed. 2 years of vigils, of hopes that were shattered, of one-sided conversations with someone who could not answer. The devices around the bed emitted constant sounds that had become the soundtrack of his life. The regular beep of the heart monitor, the whisper of the respirator, the low hum of the equipment that kept Sarah alive. She was there, so close, and at the same time so distant. His eyes were open, but there was no sign of recognition when he spoke. No movement, no reaction, just those empty eyes that once shone when they saw him coming home from work. Mark held her hand as he did every day. A hand that had once caressed his face, that had held his during walks in the park, that had trembled with excitement when he proposed to her. Now it was just dead weight between his fingers. "Hi, love," he whispered, as he always did. "How was your day?" The question echoed in the silence of the room. Sarah didn't blink, didn't move her lips, didn't give any sign that she heard him. Mark took a deep breath, feeling the familiar lump in his throat. "I brought her favorite flowers. White lilies. Remember how happy you were when I arrived with them?" Sarah's eyes were still fixed on the ceiling. Mark looked around the room that had become his second home. Withered flowers in vases scattered around the tables, cards from people who had gradually stopped visiting, the armchair where he slept on nights when he couldn't go home. His life had stopped at that moment 2 years ago, when he received the call that changed everything, Mr. Mark. "It is from the General Hospital. His wife had an accident." The words still echoed in his mind with the same painful clarity as the first day. The desperate rush to the hospital, the doctors with their serious faces. The medical terms she didn't fully understand, but that meant one thing: Sarah might never wake up again. Dr. Williams entered the room with his usual solemn expression. It was a middle-aged, gray-haired man who had followed the case from the beginning. Mark respected him, trusted him, but also feared his visits because they always brought the same devastating news. "How is she today, doctor?" Mark asked, even though he already knew the answer. Dr. Williams approached the bed, checked the machines, examined Sarah with precise and careful movements. His expression revealed no hope. "There have been no significant changes, Mark. Reflexes remain absent. There is no response to external stimuli." Mark felt the familiar weight descend on his shoulders. What about the chances of recovery? Is there any new research, any experimental treatment? The doctor sighed, a sound Mark had learned to interpret over those 2 years. "Mark, you know we've always been honest with each other. After 2 years in a vegetative state, the chances of recovery are extremely low." "But it's not zero," Mark insisted, clinging to that last hope. "It's not zero," Dr. Williams agreed gently, "but they are also not realistic." "You're young, Mark. He has the right to a life." The words hit Mark like a punch in the stomach. It was the first time the doctor had suggested anything other than wait and see. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe it's time to consider other options. Sarah is being artificially kept. She doesn't feel pain, she's not conscious. And you—" Dr. Williams paused, choosing his words carefully. "You're slowly killing yourself." Mark looked at Sarah again. He tried to find some sign, anything that indicated that she was still there, somewhere behind those empty eyes. But there was nothing. Only the body he loved, without the soul that inhabited it. "Doctor, is there really no hope?" His voice came out broken, carried by the weight of 2 years of accumulated pain. Dr. Williams nodded his head negatively, his eyes showing genuine compassion. "I'm sorry, Mark, I'm really sorry." That afternoon, Mark made the hardest decision of his life. He gathered Sarah's family in the hospital waiting room. His parents, his sister, some close friends who still kept in touch. They all looked at them as he entered, waiting for the news he brought each week. "I have something to say to you," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "After a lot of thought, a lot of suffering, I decided that I'm going to file for divorce." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's mother put her hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Her father rose from his chair, his face red with indignation. "How can you do that to her?" The man exploded. "She's like this because of you." "It wasn't because of me," Mark replied, trying to stay calm. "It was an accident, and I can't go on living like this. I tried for 2 years, but I can't anymore." Sarah's sister Jennifer approached him. "Mark, please think again. She can wake up at any moment." "It can, but it probably won't," Mark said, the words coming out like razor blades. The doctor was clear. 2 years, Jennifer. 2 years of my life, 2 years waiting for a miracle that won't happen." "So is this?" Sarah's mother asked, her voice full of bitterness. "Will you abandon her when she needs it most?" Mark took a deep breath, trying to find the strength to continue. "I'm not abandoning it. You can continue to take care of her. But I have the right to be happy again." The words echoed through the room like a confession of betrayal. Some friends shook their heads in disapproval. Others just looked at him with pity. Mark knew he was going to be judged. He knew he was going to be hated for this decision, but he also knew he couldn't go on living as a ghost. 3 months later, the wedding ceremony took place in a small, inconspicuous chapel on the outskirts of town. Only a few guests were present, a few of Mark's co-workers, a few friends who understood his decision, and Ashley's family. The bride wore a simple white dress and smiled with a happiness that seemed genuine. Ashley was the nurse who had taken care of Sarah during the last months of her hospitalization. A beautiful woman, with blonde hair and blue eyes, who had been kind and understanding to Mark during the most difficult times. She comforted him when he cried, listened when he needed to speak, offered a shoulder when the weight of the situation became unbearable. "I never imagined I'd find love again," Mark said during his vows, his voice breaking. "Ashley brought me back to life when I thought I had lost everything." Ashley smiled, holding his hands. "And I promised to take care of you as I took care of her," he replied, his words carrying a meaning that Mark couldn't fully grasp at that moment. Local society was scandalized by the speed of the marriage. Whispers ran through the corridors of the hospital, through the streets of the small town where everyone knew each other. What kind of man abandons his comatose wife to marry the nurse? There must be something else behind this story. Poor Sarah, betrayed even in her state. Mark tried to ignore the comments, but every judgmental look, every whisper he picked up, weighed heavily on his conscience. He justified himself to anyone who would listen. "I have the right to be happy again. Sarah doesn't even know that I exist. I can't waste my life waiting for a miracle." Ashley always defended him on these occasions, was always by his side when the criticism became unbearable. "You did the right thing," she would say. "You can't live in the past forever." 6 months after the wedding, Mark had begun to get used to his new life. The house he shared with Ashley was different from the one he had shared with Sarah. More modern, less cozy, but it was a new beginning. Ashley cooked for him, talked about work, planned trips they would take together. It was a normal life, something Mark had forgotten what it was like. One Tuesday morning, while he was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, his phone rang. It was Dr. Williams. "Mark, could you come to my office today? I have something important to discuss with you." There was something about the doctor's tone that made Mark shiver. "Is it about Sarah? Did she die?" "No, that's not it. But it's better to talk in person. Can it be this afternoon?" Mark nodded, a strange sensation settling in his stomach. Throughout the day, he was unable to concentrate on work. Ashley noticed her restlessness when she called during lunch. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Dr. Williams wants to see me. He said it's important." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure you want to go? You're starting a new life, Mark. Maybe it's better to leave the past where it is." "I need to go," Mark replied. "If it's something about Sarah, I need to know." At 3 in the afternoon, Mark was sitting in Dr. Williams's office. The doctor seemed nervous, restless, as if he was carrying a weight he didn't know how to share. "Mark, what I'm going to show you can be very disturbing," Dr. Williams began. "During those 2 years, we installed a camera in Sarah's room to monitor for any seizures or changes in her condition. It is a standard procedure for patients in a prolonged coma. Mark nodded, not understanding where the conversation was going. Yesterday, I was reviewing recordings from the last few months for a study on sleep patterns in vegetative patients when I discovered something. Something that will change everything you think you know about Sarah's case. Dr. Williams turned the computer monitor toward Mark and clicked play. The black and white image showed Sarah's family room. She was in bed, motionless as always, connected to the machines. The timestamp showed a date from 6 months ago. "Watch closely," Dr. Williams said, his voice strained. On the screen, a figure entered the room. It was Ashley, wearing her nurse's uniform. She approached Sarah's bed, checked the machines, and then did something that made Mark's blood run cold in her veins. She pulled a syringe out of her pocket and injected something into Sarah's serum. What is she doing?" Mark asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Keep watching," Dr. Williams replied somberly. The camera kept recording. Ashley remained in the room for a few minutes, watching Sarah, and then something impossible happened on the screen. Sarah moved her hand. A subtle, almost imperceptible movement, but definitely a voluntary movement. Mark leaned closer to the screen, not believing his eyes. She moved. Yes. And there's more. Dr. Williams advanced the recording to another date. Again, Ashley entered the room, again injected something into the serum. But this time, before the injection, the images showed something even more shocking. Sarah had her eyes open, and her eyes followed Ashley as she moved around the room. There was awareness in that look, there was fear. "My God," Mark muttered, his hands shaking. She was awake. The recordings show that Sarah has had several moments of consciousness over the past few months, moments when he showed clear signs of neurological recovery. But whenever that happened, Dr. Williams paused the video just as Ashley leaned over Sarah with the syringe. The quality of the image allowed you to see the movement of Ashley's lips. Mark couldn't hear what she said, but he could see the terror in Sarah's eyes. What was she injecting? Mark asked, though some of him already knew he didn't want to know the answer. A potent muscle relaxant combined with a sedative, in carefully calculated doses, to keep Sarah in an artificial vegetative state without causing immediate death. The room revolved around Mark. He clung to the table, trying to process what he was discovering. Was Ashley purposely keeping Sarah in a coma? That's what the evidence suggests. And there's more recordings, Mark. Much more, Dr. Williams showed clip after clip. Ashley entering the room during night shifts, always with the syringe, always checking that there were no witnesses. In one of the recordings, Sarah had managed to move her entire arm, trying to reach the emergency button. Ashley saw her and quickly increased the dosage. But the most disturbing recording was the last one. Ashley leaned over Sarah, who was clearly conscious, her eyes moving desperately, trying to communicate something. Ashley whispered something in his ear, and although there was no audio, the movement of his lips was clear enough for Mark to understand the words, "He'll be mine. You'll never go back to it." Sarah tried to form words with her lips, her desperate eyes fixed on Ashley. For a terrible moment, Mark could see the full awareness in her eyes, the realization of what was happening, the horror of being trapped in her own body while being systematically poisoned by the person who was supposed to take care of her. She knew, Mark whispered, tears beginning to roll down his face. Sarah knew what was going on and couldn't do anything. Dr. Williams turned off the monitor. "Mark, I stopped the experimental treatment that Ashley had been giving 3 days ago since I discovered these recordings. Sarah is already showing signs of recovery. Reflexes are returning. There are voluntary eye movements." Mark staggered up from his chair, the world spinning around him. Everything he had believed, all the decisions he had made, all the guilt he had carried, all based on a carefully constructed lie. Where is Ashley now?" he managed to ask. "At home, I imagine. Mark, you need to go to the police immediately. What this woman did is attempted murder. It destroyed 2 years of Sarah's life, manipulated you, destroyed a marriage." Mark left the office in shock. He drove home mechanically, his brain trying to process the implications of everything he had discovered. Ashley was in the kitchen when he arrived, preparing dinner like it was any other day. "Hi, love," she said cheerfully, turning to greet him. "How was your conversation with Dr. Williams?" Mark looked at her as if he saw her for the first time. The blonde hair he thought was beautiful, the smile he thought was genuine, the hands he had kissed during their marriage, the same hands that had systematically tortured his wife for months. He showed me some interesting recordings, Mark said, his voice controlled. Ashley stopped stirring the food, but she didn't turn around. Recordings? From Sarah's room. Security cameras that monitored possible seizures. The silence that followed was fraught with tension. Ashley finally turned around, and Mark could see that the smile had disappeared from his face. "And what did these recordings show?" she asked, her voice now cold. "You know exactly what they showed." Ashley let go of the spoon she was holding. For a moment, the two stared at each other in silence. Then slowly, Ashley's face transformed. The mask fell, revealing something dark underneath. "She was an obstacle," Ashley said simply. "You would never really be mine as long as she was alive. But I couldn't kill her directly. It would be very suspicious. So you decided to keep it as a vegetable to convince me it was a hopeless case. And it worked, didn't it?" Ashley smiled, but there was no humor in her expression. "You married me. You chose life over death." Mark felt nausea creeping up his throat. "You're sick. Sarah was recovering, and you were keeping it trapped in your own body. Sarah was weak. She would never give you the life I can give. I saved you from her, Mark. You should thank me." It was at this moment that Mark realized the true extent of Ashley's psychopathy. She truly believed that she had done something noble, something necessary. There was no remorse in his eyes, there was no guilt. Just the cold conviction of someone who had planned and executed the systematic torture of an innocent woman. "The police have already been called," Mark lied. Hoping to see some panicked reaction, Ashley just laughed. "No, it wasn't. You're too smart to do that without first coming here to try to understand. But it's also too weak to really give me away." She approached him, and Mark instinctively retreated. "Think about it, Mark. Sarah may be recovering now, but after 2 years she'll never be the same. Brain damage is permanent. She will be an invalid for life. Do you want to trade our perfect life for this? Our life is built on torture and lies." "Our life is built on love," Ashley retorted. "I did all this for love. Because I love you more than she ever did." Mark looked at the woman he had married and saw a monster that had manipulated his pain, exploited his vulnerability, destroyed his life and Sarah's with a calculating coldness that made him tremble. "I'm going to the police now," he said. Making his way to the door, Ashley followed him. "If you do that, you're going to destroy your own life as well. Who's going to believe you didn't know? You married me 3 months after you abandoned your comatose wife. How are you going to explain that?" Mark stopped at the door, his hand on the handle. It was true. He would seem complicit. It would seem that he had planned everything together with Ashley. His reputation, his career, his social life, everything would be destroyed. "But I didn't know," he muttered. "Do you think it matters?" Ashley laughed bitterly. "Do you think people will care about details? The story will always be the man who cheated on his comatose wife to marry the murderous nurse." Mark felt the weight of truth in Ashley's words. Even if he proved his innocence, even if he exposed her crimes, he would carry that mark forever. But then she thought of Sarah, trying to move her lips to form words as she was systematically drugged, her desperate eyes begging for help that never came. "I don't care," he said, opening the door. "Sarah deserves justice." Mark drove directly to the police station. Half an hour later, Ashley was being arrested. The ensuing investigations revealed that she had forged nursing degrees, had worked in other hospitals where patients died under suspicious circumstances, and possessed an arsenal of drugs that she had stolen from various medical institutions over the years. Dr. Williams confirmed that Sarah was indeed recovering quickly since Ashley's experimental treatment had been stopped. Within a week, she was moving her arms. Within 2 weeks, he was speaking fragmented words. Within a month, she could sit up in bed. Mark visited Sarah on the day she was able to utter her first full sentences since the accident. She was pale, very thin, but her eyes had life again. When he entered the room, she smiled faintly. "Hi," she said, her voice hoarse but clear. "Hi," Mark replied, tears rolling freely down his face. "How are you feeling?" "Confusing, scared, but live." Sarah paused, looking at him intently. "The doctor explained to me what happened. About Ashley, about you, about marriage." Mark braced himself for the anger, for the accusation, for the hatred that was sure to come. He had abandoned his wife. He had married the woman who tortured her. How could Sarah forgive something like that? "I remember a few moments," Sarah continued. "Moments when I was awake but couldn't move. I saw you sometimes crying next to me, begging me to wake up. And Sarah shuddered. She would tell me that you never loved me, that you were glad I was out of the way. Sarah, You didn't know, she interrupted him. I know you didn't know. She told me how she manipulated you, how she used her pain to control you. You were also a victim of it. Mark knelt by the bed, holding Sarah's hand. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I gave up on you, that I believed there was no hope, that I married. With that thing, Sarah squeezed his hand weakly. You did what anyone would do. 2 years, Mark. 2 years waiting. I can't blame you for trying to move on. But I should have known. I should have noticed something. How could you? She was a nurse. She was a professional. She knew exactly how to keep me in a vegetative state without arousing suspicion. Sarah paused, looking out the window. What matters is that the truth has come out, and that you did the right thing when you found out. In the months that followed, Mark dedicated his life to Sarah's care. He had annulled his marriage to Ashley, who was awaiting trial for attempted murder, illegal practice of medicine, and a host of other charges. Investigations revealed that she had killed at least 2 other patients in previous hospitals, using similar methods. Sarah gradually regained most of her motor and cognitive functions. The doctors explained that the brain damage was minimized because Ashley had used drugs that suppressed neural activity without causing permanent cell death. It was as if Sarah had been in an induced coma, rather than having suffered actual brain trauma. The recovery was not easy. Sarah had to relearn how to walk, write, and perform simple tasks that she used to do automatically. Mark was by her side during every physiotherapy session, every doctor's appointment, every moment of frustration when progress seemed slow. Why are you doing this? Sarah asked one afternoon, after a particularly difficult physical therapy session. You could have moved on. I could have found someone normal without all this baggage. Mark looked at her, seeing not the frail woman in recovery, but the strong, resilient person who had survived 2 years of systematic torture. Because I love you. Because you're my wife. Because I almost lost you in a way I never thought possible, but people will always remember. They will always whisper about the man who abandoned his wife in a coma. Let them whisper, Mark replied. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. A year after Sarah's recovery, Ashley was sentenced to life in prison. During the trial, horrific details came to light. It turned out that she had developed an obsession with Mark long before Sarah's accident, and that the accident itself might not have been accidental. Although it was never proven, evidence suggested that Ashley had sabotaged Sarah's car, causing the accident that landed her in the hospital in the first place. Ashley never showed remorse. During her testimony, she maintained that she had done everything out of love, that Sarah didn't deserve Mark, that she had just accelerated an inevitable process. The judge, in handing down the sentence, said that he had never witnessed a case of such extreme and cruel psychological manipulation. Sarah has become an advocate for the rights of patients in a vegetative state, working to implement stricter monitoring and protection protocols. She gave lectures about her experience, raising awareness about the signs of medical abuse and the importance of second opinions in prolonged cases. I don't know if I would have the strength that you have, a woman in the audience once said after one of Sarah's lectures. You would, Sarah replied, because when you're facing absolute darkness, when you're trapped in your own body, listening to someone plot your destruction, you discover reserves of strength that you didn't even know existed, and you discover that true love always finds a way. Mark and Sarah renewed their wedding vows in a simple ceremony, surrounded by the family and friends who had supported them during the ordeal. This time there were no shadows hanging over their union. There were no lies or manipulations. It was just the love of 2 people who had been through hell and chosen to be together. During the ceremony, Sarah made sure to include a special promise in her vows. I promise that no matter what the future holds, I will always fight to get back to you. I will always find a way back. Mark held her hand, seeing in her eyes the same light he had fallen in love with years ago. And I promise that I will never doubt us again. I will never give up. I will never let anyone separate us again. 2 years later, they had a son. Sarah had worried about possible neurological complications due to what she had been through, but doctors assured her that she was completely recovered. The boy was born healthy, and when Mark first held him, he thought about how life can change dramatically, both for better and for better. Ashley remained in prison, where she never received a single visit. The years of manipulation and cruelty had cost him not only his freedom, but also any chance of redemption or forgiveness. She had staked everything on an obsessive love and lost everything, her career, her freedom, and ironically, the man she had tried to conquer through such extreme means. Mark and Sarah's story has become a symbol of hope for families dealing with patients in a prolonged coma. It showed the importance of medical vigilance, the need to question diagnoses when something seems wrong, and most importantly, that true love can survive the greatest trials. Sarah often reflected on the 2 years she had lost, on the moments of consciousness when she had desperately tried to communicate, on the terror of being trapped in her own body while being systematically drugged. But she also thought about the strength she had discovered in herself, the forgiveness she had been able to offer, and how the experience had deepened her understanding of what really mattered in life. "People ask me if I'm angry," she once said during an interview, "and I respond that anger would give Ashley more power over my life than she ever had. I choose forgiveness not for her, but for me. I choose love because it is stronger than hate. I choose life because I almost lost it in a way that should never have happened." Mark had learned equally valuable lessons about the importance of trusting your instincts, about how manipulation can be subtle and devastating, and about how true love sometimes means fighting for someone, even when it seems impossible. Today, years after the whole nightmare, Mark and Sarah live a life that many envy, not for material possessions, but for the depth of love they share. They know what it's like to almost lose everything. They know the value of each day together, of each whispered word, of each shared look. Her story spread across the country, becoming a symbol of hope for couples facing similar crises. Mark often lectures on the signs of psychological manipulation, while Sarah spends part of her time visiting comatose patients, talking to them, touching their hands, whispering words of hope in their ears. "I know you're in there," she always says to each patient. "I know you can hear me. Keep fighting. Someone is waiting for you outside." Their son, now 5, has the smart eyes of his father and the tireless determination of his mother. When asked about the scar Sarah carries on her left arm, a permanent mark on the feeding tubes, he replies with childlike simplicity, "It's the place where Mum kept the courage to come home." Ashley never received visits in prison again. "In the early years, I wrote obsessive letters to Mark, letters he never opened. Eventually, even these stopped coming." The prison system categorized her as a high-risk psychopath, keeping her in isolation to protect other inmates from her manipulative impulses. During one of the appeals trials that Ashley attempted, the judge uttered words that echoed in the halls of the courtroom. The crime here was not just against one person, but against the very institution of medical care, against the trust we place in those who swear to protect the vulnerable. The defendant transformed healing instruments into weapons of torture. Dr. Williams, deeply shaken by having been unwittingly complicit in Sarah's suffering, implemented revolutionary monitoring protocols in his clinic, cameras with audio, cross-checks of medications, and alert systems that detect suspicious patterns of deterioration in patients. His research on malicious-induced coma has become a world reference in the medical field. The hospital where Ashley worked also underwent a complete overhaul. It turned out that she had falsified not only diplomas, but also references from previous jobs. The institution has established stricter background checks and implemented surveillance systems that make it nearly impossible for an employee to work alone with critically ill patients. Sarah often reflects on the moments of consciousness she had during the induced coma. "People think it's like sleeping," she explains in her talks, but it's not. It's like being trapped in a transparent prison, seeing everything, hearing everything, feeling everything, but not being able to react. It's a type of torture that has no name. She especially remembers one night when Ashley whispered in her ear, "You're going to die alone and forgotten, and I'm going to comfort you until he doesn't even remember your name." In that moment, Sarah felt something she had never experienced before, a pure, primal anger that paradoxically kept her alive. "It was this anger that gave me the strength to fight," she says, "the determination not to let that woman win." Mark has learned to recognize subtle signs of manipulation that had previously gone unnoticed. "Ashley was a master at making me feel that my doubts were signs of weakness," he explains. "She validated my pain, offered a shoulder to cry on, and gradually planted seeds of hopelessness about Sarah's recovery. All very subtle, very calculated. The couple has developed a routine that honors both trauma and healing. Every night before bed, they ask each other a question. How are you really? It is a question that goes beyond okay or am I okay? It requires honesty, vulnerability, real presence. We almost miss the opportunity to grow old together, Mark says. Now every wrinkle that appears on her face is a victory. Every grey hair is proof that we survived. Sarah resumed many of the activities she loved before the accident. She returns to painting, something she did before she got married, and her canvases reflect a deep understanding of light and darkness, of hope emerging from despair. One of her paintings, titled Prisoner of Light, shows a female figure in a hospital room, but golden rays of light streak through the windows, suggesting that even in the deepest darkness, hope persists. Their relationship is not perfect. Sarah sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night, panicking, thinking she's still paralyzed. Mark sometimes blames himself for not noticing the signs sooner. They go to therapy together, one-on-one, and participate in support groups for survivors of medical trauma. People romanticize our history, Sarah notes. They think it was like a movie where love conquers all. But the truth is that it was hard work. Rebuilding trust, relearning how to be together, how to be vulnerable after so much betrayal. That doesn't happen automatically. Mark adds, what saved our marriage wasn't just love. It was the conscious daily choice to choose each other again. To choose forgiveness, not only to forgive Ashley, but to forgive ourselves. 3 years after Ashley's arrest, they received an unexpected call. It was from a nurse from another state, saying she had found evidence that Ashley may have been responsible for suspicious deaths in hospitals where she worked years before she met Mark and Sarah. The investigation revealed a pattern that stretched for nearly a decade. Vulnerable patients, unexplained deaths, ever-present Ashley. Realizing that we could have been just 2 more victims on a very long list was shocking, Sarah recalls, but it also made me understand that our survival had a greater purpose. We stopped her. Our story exposed their crimes and prevented future victims. The book Sarah wrote about her experience, Awakening from the Silence, became a national bestseller. The royalties were donated in full to research on coma recovery and to organizations that support victims of medical crimes. The book was adapted into a documentary that won international awards. During the release of the documentary, a journalist asked Sarah if she could forgive Ashley. Her response has become one of the most shared quotes about forgiveness. Forgiving does not mean forgetting or minimizing what she did. Forgiving means that I refuse to let the hatred for her continue to poison my life. She already stole 2 years of mine. I'm not going to give her another day. Mark and Sarah now work together on a foundation they created called Silent Voices. The organization works to establish the rights of coma patients, stricter safety protocols in hospitals, and offers legal and emotional support for families dealing with similar situations. We turned our greatest tragedy into our greatest mission, Mark explains. Every family we help, every safety protocol we put in place, every patient who gets better care because of our advocacy, it gives meaning to the suffering we go through. The Foundation's office is housed in a renovated Victorian house with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. On the main wall there is a photo of Sarah in the hospital, still connected to the machines, but with her eyes open and Mark holding her hand. It is a picture of vulnerability and strength, of near loss and miraculous recovery. Some people think it's morbid that we keep this photo, Sarah explains. But for us, it represents the exact moment when our real life started again. The moment when the truth came out and we could finally fight together against what had separated us. They receive hundreds of letters a month, from patients in recovery, from families facing impossible decisions, from health professionals inspired to be more vigilant. One letter that particularly marked them was from a young nurse who wrote, "Your story has taught me that our profession is sacred, that when someone is vulnerable, we are their guardians. I promise to honor this responsibility every day of my career." Ashley, meanwhile, developed a terrible reputation in prison. Other inmates avoid her, and she has spent most of the past few years in solitary confinement. Psychiatric reports indicate that she never developed genuine remorse for her actions. Instead, she has created an alternative narrative where she sees herself as a victim of a system that didn't understand her love. "It's scary," the correctional psychiatrist noted in his report. She genuinely believes she was doing Mark a favor by freeing him from Sarah. The complete lack of empathy for the victim is total. She can't understand Sarah as a real person, with rights and dignity of her own. Dr. Williams, now retired, frequently visits Mark and Sarah's foundation. He admits that carrying the guilt for not uncovering Ashley's crimes sooner was one of the biggest challenges of his career. "As a doctor, you swear not to do harm," he says. "To find out that my clinic was used as an instrument of torture for 2 years, it was devastating, but he also found purpose in pain. Its new monitoring protocols have been adopted by hospitals across the country. He developed seminars on ethical medical surveillance that are now mandatory for healthcare professionals in many states. If our story serves to protect at least one person from going through what Sarah went through," Mark reflects, "then it was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt we had." Today, when Mark looks at Sarah, he doesn't see a trauma survivor. He sees a warrior who fought against unimaginable forces and won. When Sarah looks at Mark, she doesn't see the man who temporarily abandoned her. She sees someone who has been manipulated by a skilled predator, and who, when she discovered the truth, did not hesitate to do the right thing, regardless of the personal consequences. "Our story is not about perfection," Sarah notes. "It's about new beginnings. It's about the human capacity to heal, to forgive, to transform trauma into purpose. It's about how true love can survive even the greatest betrayals, as long as there's honesty, hard work, and the willingness to fight together against anything that tries to tear us apart." And there, between tears and tight hugs, that couple discovered that nothing is stronger than the truth, and that love, even wounded, can be reborn to protect those who need it most. Comment "True Love," so I know you've made it to the end of this story, and mark your comment with a beautiful heart. And just like Mark and Sarah's story, I have another heartwarming narrative to share with you. Just click on the video that is now appearing on your screen and embark on another exciting story. A big kiss, and I'll wait for you there.